May I have a motion to reconvene into open session? Motion, Mrs. Mamalito, seconded by Dr. Siddiqui. All in favor? 5-0. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have a motion to approve the previous minutes from the meeting of March 14, 2022? Motion by Mrs. Weiss, seconded by Mrs. Mamalito. All in favor? 5-0. I also have a motion to approve the minutes of, and I take that back, excuse me, today's March 14th, but there was no meeting on March 14th. That was for the minutes of February 10th, 2022. Can I strike what we just did? Thank you, strike that. That vote was for the minutes of the February 10th meeting. Now may I have a motion to approve the minutes for the March 3rd meeting? Motion, Mrs. Mamalito, seconded, Mrs. Weiss. All in favor? 5-0. All right, Dr. Bossert, that brings us up to our portion for accommodations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tomeo. This is always one of my favorite portions of the night where we have the opportunity to recognize some outstanding members of our faculty, staff, and certainly students. I have some assistance with this tonight to honor some very well-deserving individuals. For the first of which, I'd like to call upon our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Dr. Hull.
Good evening, Board of Education, Dr. Bossert. Would Mrs. Elizabeth Held please join me up at the podium? Mrs. Held is a third-grade teacher at Boyd Intermediate School. Mrs. Held's name may be familiar as she has applied for and received multiple grants from not only the Elwood Endowment, but well over 35 grants in total from multiple sources. And if your child has been in her class, you will remember the special activities, the emphasis on STEM learning, and the excellent communication she provides in her now 28th year of Every Friday newsletters. In 2018, Mrs. Held was nominated and awarded the prestigious New York State Excellence in Teaching Award. This evening, Mrs. Held is being commended as she was recently named a New York State Master Teacher by the Governor's Office, recognizing her exemplary work in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and math education. What is a master teacher? Master teachers are strong classroom teachers committed to developing even further their own knowledge of content, the craft of teaching, and understanding of students. Master teachers grapple with ideas that are central to the STEM discipline. Like any scientist or mathematician, they view their own knowledge as incomplete. Master teachers continually evaluate, refine, and adapt their practice to better meet the needs of students, their families, and the entire community. Being identified as a master teacher is only the beginning. Mrs. Held now begins a 4-year program, during which time she will commit to engage in professional development work outside of her regular school responsibilities. She will be meeting regularly in the evening and on weekends to participate in activities for professional growth with other master teachers. She will provide professional development to college students majoring in education, as well as new teachers, and she will be participating in a professional learning team on topics such as the New York State Learning Standards in mathematics and science. Mrs. Held has earned this designation through outstanding classroom instruction, a career of creating engaging ways for students to learn and contribute to the school, and through wonderful district initiatives. Rather than list any of those, I'd just like to share an example of what exemplifies the type of teacher Mrs. Held is. This application process was very long and rigorous. Throughout the year, Mrs. Held's third graders have been with her on each step of her journey. She discussed the process with her students. She gave short presentations on the types of activities she was engaged in, and she talked to them about how and why this was a goal and a dream of hers. She also explained that she might not be selected and how she would handle that disappointment, and she vowed to her students that she would try again. These real-world lessons in perseverance, determination, believing in yourself, and undertaking challenging tasks will long be remembered by her students, particularly when they face their own challenges as they work to their own dreams and goals. The Elwood School District is so proud of Mrs. Held's accomplishments, and we're excited at the prospect of the benefits to our students and our staff through the world-class professional development you will now be a part of. Best wishes and congratulations.
The full board's coming for this one, Doc.
All right.
We are also very pleased to honor a number of our student athletes tonight. I thank so many of them for being here, as well as their coaches. And to help recognize their outstanding achievement and accomplishments, I'd like to call upon our Director of Athletics, Mr. David Shanahan.
Elwood Board of Education members, Dr. Bossert, administrators, parents, grandparents, and student athletes. What a tremendous winter sports season our athletic department has had. All of our winter teams are New York State Scholar Athlete teams, which is a tremendous honor. Many of our teams went deep into the playoffs and did well in league play. There are many factors that contribute to winning a championship or competing at the New York State Championship level. They are team chemistry, belief in team and self, determination, exceptional coaching, trust, hard work, team and self-discipline, self-reflection, humility, love for the sport, and love for your teammates. Parent support and guidance during the good times and difficult times of athletics have helped mold you into the student athletes that you are today. The memories you have created for yourself, your teammates, your family, and school district will last a lifetime. When the season begins, coaches and athletes create goals to reach the pinnacle of their sport and win championships. In reality, very few athletes will ever have the chance to accomplish winning a championship. What our student athletes have accomplished this past winter is exceptional and is the highest honor New York State bestows on student athletes. The memories you have created will last a lifetime as you grow older, and these young ladies and gentlemen will cherish the memories they have created for themselves, their families, the Elwood community. Congratulations to each one of you, and thank you for having Elwood pride. Tonight, we're going to recognize the outstanding accomplishments of John H. Glenn exceptional student athletes. First up, the John H. Glenn County Wrestling Champions, the John H. Glenn Wrestling Knights. Come on down, boys. Ms. Nardelli, please come up. Mr. Brocking, I know he has a blue wave tonight. So guys, face the crowd. Mr. Nardelli's going to hand out your certificate. Yeah. First up, our county wrestling champions, John H. Glenn Knights. John H. Glenn placed an amazing 9 athletes from the county wrestling championships to represent John Glenn at the New York State Wrestling Championship meet. The following young men were county champions. Those who do not know wrestling, whether you're Division I or Division II wrestler, being a county champion is a tremendous amount of hard work and dedication to get there. Parents sacrifice. Some say wrestling, it may be the most difficult sport on a daily basis. Our county championships are, please step forward as I call your name, Colin Presti, county champion. Joe LaCourte, county champion. Anthony Mirando, county champion. Melkin Alfaro Chavez, county champion. And Tommy Aiello, county champion. John Glenn also had 4 county place winners that also represented John H. Glenn upstate. They are Kevin Vitas Surdo, please stand forward. Alan Alkali, please stand forward. Luke Angus, please stand forward. And Mike Sandriardi, please stand forward. The team was led by Coach Brocking, Coach Nardelli, and Coach Patrovich. And additionally, I think it's really important to mention that one of our wrestlers, and this makes us all proud, even more so, Joe LaCourte was named Suffolk County Sportsmanship winner. We are proud of you all, and thank you for having Elwood pride and representing us so well on the wrestling mat in the county, in the league, and upstate New York. Congratulations, wrestling team.
Hold on, Greg, we have a board member coming up. Sorry. No, you never wrestled.
Okay. Yep. Next, I'd like to bring up the girls and boys winter track team. Come on forward. The girls' winter team was led by Coach Burke and Coach Sicoli, and the boys' team was led by Coach Mike Marino. Both teams had a fantastic winter season. From the girls' winter track team, Emily Mena and Sophia Condren competed at the New York State Winter Track Championships held at Ocean Breeze on Staten Island. Emily Lamena, please stand forward. Emily Lametta had a personal record in the 3,000 meters in a very competitive race. Emily is a wonderful teammate and tremendous student athlete. Congratulations, Emily Lametta. Sophia Condren, please step forward. Sophia Condren took the lead for the majority of the 1,000 meter race and ended up with the 5th fastest time. It's not a typo. Not in the county, 5th fastest time in the country. Unbelievable race. I was there to watch it. It was unbelievable. Congratulations. Both Emily and Sophia qualified for the prestigious National Indoor Track Meet held this past weekend in the Armory in New York City, where they competed against the best runners in the country. Sophia Condren, please step forward again, is ranked 40th in the country in the 600 and 29th in the country in the 1,000 meters. Emily, step forward. Emily Lamena is ranked 57th in the country in the 3,000 meters. Sophia Condren will be attending Rutgers University in the fall, and Emily Lamena will be back next year for her senior year. Unbelievable. Congratulations to both of you. Jimmy Rourke, please stand forward. Jimmy Rourke is a current junior who placed fourth in the county meet in the 300 meters with a time of 36:52. In the New York State meet, Jimmy ran a time of 36:48. Jimmy is an exceptional team leader and is a young man of the highest integrity and character. Jimmy is also a three-sport athlete at John Glenn. I look forward to watching Jimmy improve on all his times in the spring and next year. Congratulations, Jimmy. Congratulations to our winter track athletes. Thank you. We'll take a- Next, I would like to bring up Mckenzie Stickelman. Mackenzie Stickelman is an outstanding student athlete who is a team leader on the John H. Glenn girls soccer team. Mackenzie was the team captain and is one of the most decorated girls soccer players ever to wear a John H. Glenn girls soccer jersey. In both her junior and senior campaigns, Mackenzie has been named League Player of the Year, All-County, Newsday All-County, and has been named All New York State by the Sports Writers and the Coaches Organization for Girls Sports. Mackenzie's work ethic and commitment to all of her team sports, music, and club is extraordinary. Mackenzie will be playing soccer next fall at Boston University. Congratulations, Mckenzie Stickelman. Congratulations, everyone.
Thank you, Coach Shanahan, for doing a wonderful job introducing all of our students, scholar athletes. On behalf of the Board of Education, we commend you, we congratulate you, we share in your successes. We thank your parents for sharing your successes through the Facebook feed and Instagram. We're able to watch you while you're up in States and cheer along with you. So enjoy your successes, and we look forward to seeing some of you come back to us, some of us play in college, and continue to succeed on and off the field. Thank you.
At this time, if those we recognize would like to attend to other studies, as it is a Monday night, I know you have a long week ahead, it would not be impolite to excuse yourself. And thank you for joining us. Want me to move on to Allie?
All right, and we are up to our student liaison, Ali Haddad.
Hello, everyone, and good evening. The past month has been a very busy month for Elwood students. Starting up at John Glenn High School, the Unity with Diversity Showcase, Volleyball-a-thon, International Night, and the Blood Drive were huge successes. John Glenn Athletics is doing amazing, with 5 wrestling county champs and numerous winter track runners competing in states, setting new school, county, and state records. Additionally, the JGHS Nightline just competed in Florida at Nationals for the first time in 3 years. The brand new John Glenn High School Performing Arts Center is now open, and musical practices have begun, with the musical being only 2 weeks away. Lastly, at the high school, new students of the month have been announced. A huge congratulations to Victoria Weisberg, Gianna Cook, Malav Shah, and Grayson Flummer for being February's Students of the Month. EMS has also been very busy. Rohan Murphy, a successful wrestler who had both his legs amputated at a young age, came to visit middle school students with a message about perseverance, determination, and living life with purpose. The 8th grade Science Olympiads brought home 2 medals, and the newly formed Ethnics Club participated in their first ever Ethnics Bowl. EMS is preparing for their Schools to Watch site visit, which is part of their 4-year process in becoming a nationally recognized model middle school. At Boyd, 5th grade students are taking their personality pictures this week and are looking forward to watching the EMS play rehearsal on March 31st. All students are participating in Spirit Days every Friday of the month, and classes in both Harley and Boyd are engaged in math pilot programs. Finally, at Harley, students are excitedly awaiting many fun events, including their Night of the Month pep rally, the new storytelling program, and for the JGHS musical students to come visit and perform at Harley on March 24th. That's all for this month. I hope you all have a good night.
Thank you, Allie. Appreciate it.
Allie, I'm sure you have some homework as well, so if you choose to excuse yourself, we certainly forgive you, and thank you, as always, for your comprehensive report.
All right, Dr. Bossert brings us up to your superintendent's report, as well as the committee report and the budget development.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Tamio. As the board and community is aware, our board has several active committees that are co-chaired by members of the Board of Education and assisted by members of the administration. Mrs. Weiss and Mrs. Mamalito co-chair our legislative committee, and as I serve as the administrative liaison, I was asked to prepare a very brief report regarding the different efforts of that committee that have taken place since the start of the school year. So I think the board is well aware that advocacy is an ongoing initiative. There's never really an advocacy day or week. It's something that we attempt to do strategically throughout the year to make sure that the priorities of Elwood are known to those who help to influence decisions. And I think our committee has done an excellent job this year representing our school, representing our community, and making sure the voice of Elwood has been heard. So some of the things that helped us to achieve that started over the summer. We began a letter writing campaign to the governor, to the health commissioner, to our commissioner of education, to talk about remote learning requirements, to talk about the importance of in-person reopening. That was a July event. Later in the fall, we had a legislative committee meeting on the 20th of October. Members of our community helped to draft a letter that turned out to serve as a template for other district efforts in advocacy to the governor at that time. I'm very proud of that letter, and it has been extremely widespread. Later that week, we submitted letters to Nancy Pelosi. We spoke about SALT deductions. Mrs. Weiss helped us to generate that letter, which I know was widespread as well. And then a letter went to the governor and team regarding masking, testing, and the mandated vaccine opposition. In October, we had a meeting with Assemblyman Keith Brown. It was via Zoom. The Assemblyman was happy to learn about so many of the positive things taking place in our district, and we told him about some of our priorities. Several members of the board were able to attend virtually the Longwood Legislative Breakfast, which is an annual event where a number of elected officials come to speak to issues that are prioritized in education. That was in February. A little later in February, the legislative committee met in this building up in the library with members of the community, and another letter was drafted that was sent to the governor and the commissioner of health, again regarding parent choice, opposing mandated vaccinations, and requesting metrics. There was also a legislative breakfast that several members of our board were able to attend remotely on the 18th of February, again speaking to elected officials and demonstrating the priorities of our district. Just this past week, just this past Friday, Mrs. Weiss represented the legislative committee at the REFIT legislative breakfast. REFIT is an organization that our district has joined. It stands for Reform Education Finance Inequities Today. It talks about making sure schools receive their fair share of state aid and regional attention financially. And Mrs. Weiss, Ms. Dunkel, and I just attended their breakfast this last Friday and heard from different elected officials and demonstrated our priorities. The legislative committee will continue to evaluate the needs of the community, the needs of the district, and make sure we are always available when elected officials reach out to us. I am attempting now to coordinate a meeting with Senator Matera's office, speak about some of the BOCES aid issues that our district is facing. While Senator Matera no longer represents our district with the new districting of elected officials, he was very curious about hearing our perspectives on vocational programs. So we're attempting to set up that meeting now. And the committee will continue to work throughout the year on any advocacy efforts that come about. This past weekend, I had the opportunity to represent our district in Albany for the annual Winter Institute of the New York State Council of School Superintendents. While there, I was able to meet with Commissioner Rosa and the Senior Deputy Commissioner, Dr. Baldwin. Not a lot of new information, but there were some things to highlight from their presentation and our discussions. DEI work, diversity, equity, inclusivity is certainly a priority at State Ed right now. There was ample discussion stressing the importance of the work and making certain that districts felt supported in initiatives taking place across the state. The commissioner spoke about the guiding principle of the work as, do we believe every student can achieve? Our answer is affirmatively yes. So we have to make sure that students have equal access to that success. She spoke about the Regents Exam. Much to the chagrin of some, the Regents exams will return as scheduled in June and August of this year, back to pre-pandemic conditions. We are waiting for some additional documentation to support that announcement, talking about any modifications there may be, any hold harmless that may exist, whether or not they're mandatory as they have been in the past or voluntary as they were during the pandemic. So we will make sure parents are fully informed, but our teachers have been working very hard this year with the mindset that the Regents exams would be taking place, and now we know they will be. There was a lot of discussion about APPR, the Annual Professional Performance Review, that impacts our teachers. There is a bill floating around the Senate that would, again, make this year a hold harmless year, that the scores that students achieve on tests wouldn't count for or against teachers in their evaluation due to the impact of the pandemic. There was talk about the new implementation of science standards at both the elementary and secondary level, that our teachers have been fully engaged in that work for a number of years now. And there was a lot of discussion about the teacher shortage that is impacting our region and the state, and different things that the state education department is trying to do in order to lessen that burden. We talked about greater partnerships with post-secondary programs to make it easier for high school students to transition into undergraduate programs. We talked about the expense associated with becoming a certified teacher between the education, the exams, and the necessary in-service coursework. Commissioner Rosa stated that she believes it's become too difficult and too expensive to become a teacher, so we need to do things to remedy that. And we also talked about flexibility within certifications that would make it more flexible for teachers to teach a different variety of courses outside of their primary certification. There was an announcement made that the new deputy commissioner focused on instruction would be the Western Suffolk BOCES district superintendent, Ms. Angelique Johnson-Dingle. That is very beneficial to our region, as she is a Western Suffolk person. Putting her in a position of authority in Albany gives us a direct pipeline to someone we know, someone we trust, someone we communicate with regularly, and having her as a deputy commissioner will certainly be to the benefit of our region. We're excited for Angelique. We can congratulate her as she starts this Thursday in the new role on St. Patrick's Day. There was discussion about ways to better assist students who are homebound and unable to attend school. We want to make sure the lessons learned during the pandemic are not lost as we move forward in endemic times. It was very valuable time spent in Albany. We did spend a good deal of time advocating for the budget that the governor presented. It's a bit different, and I've discussed this with the board before, where the governor's proposed budget was record levels of financing in the state. Now, it's important to note that that impacts every district very differently, and the windfall of new finances that the state has enjoyed isn't necessarily enjoyed by every district, certainly not the Elwood School District, unfortunately, but the level of aid that was given across the state was a record high for New York. So when the legislature adopted the governor's budget, that was wonderful, that there were reductions made to her proposal. The proposal also included some changes to some practices across the state that we'll be hearing more about in the coming weeks. It was a valuable trip to Albany. I appreciate the board's support for my attendance and my continued professional development, and some of the lessons that I am able to bring back with me, I hope will positively impact our district and students. Any questions about the Legislative Committee report or time in Albany?
Seeing none, Dr. Bossert, are good. And thank you to our Legislative Committee co-chairs and the community for the hard work that was put forth over the last few months, past 2 years. We clearly have an objective outcome here that everybody was looking for, so great work. And glad to hear Albany went well, and we are still working towards the objectives that we're trying to achieve. It'd be nice that the budget comes out on time, and we know what we're working with. Unfortunately, it is unfortunate that we did not receive as much aid as other districts in New York, but we're accustomed to that. So I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tamio. And to further that conversation, tonight we would like to give the board a brief update on our budget development. So I'm going to call upon our Assistant Superintendent, Ms. Dunkel, to go through some of the slides that help to illustrate where we are at this time. Ms. Dunkel's in a very difficult position this time of year where we really need to try to become very specific in where we are going to establish our budget and make sure that the expenses and the proposed revenue will match. Part of that requires her to do her very best predictions on where we will come in at different expenses. But just as we are, as individuals, being impacted by a sudden increase in fuel expenses and noted increase to healthcare, our district is facing that also. So Ms. Dunkel and the business office are in the unenviable position of trying to fine-tune the crystal ball. So tonight is as clear a view as we can get from that device, which we hope will give the board enough insight to direct the administration on efforts to further develop the budget prior to our next meeting. Ms. Dunkel?
Thank you, Dr. Bossert, and good evening to the community and the board members. Just a small statement I just wanted to bring out. A sound budget provides schools the flexibility to respond to curriculum changes and allocate resources where they are needed most. It can also save time and reduce fiscal stress associated with unplanned expenditures and lost revenue while reducing the risk of a financial crisis. I feel this statement is very important because it's the basis of how we have continuously built our budgets here in Elwood, for at least since, well, for many years, but I know especially since I've been here. And we've talked about it at many of the board meetings and just how to best leave Elwood in a good place for not just this year, but for the years going forward. So this first slide is looking at our current budget scenario. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just trying to turn this on. It doesn't seem to be. There we go. It's pretty self-explanatory, this slide. The revenue budget has these various categories that we look at each year: tax levy, state aid, pilot, reserves, fund balance, and other. These are the categories that make up the revenue side of the budget. And the way that budgets are built now with New York State tax cap, we typically have to build the revenue budget first and then try to best estimate the expenses. And where we sometimes run into a problem is where we build the revenue and build the revenue side of the budget, and it's at a particular limit, and then we project all of the expenses, and our expenses are much higher than what the revenue budget is. We're not facing that issue this year, but it is important, I think, for the community and the board to understand exactly where we lie as far as our expenses versus revenue is concerned. So the first line item, our tax levy, shows the current 21-22 levy versus the anticipated revenue for tax levy of 22-23, and that's currently built at a 3.4% tax levy. Our state aid, as Dr. Bossert was just speaking to, Elwood saw an increase for next year of roughly $860,000, which is really not a lot of money. And again, that's based on the governor's current proposal. We do not anticipate that figure fluctuating very much, if at all. Our pilot money slightly increased. Our current reserve allocation and our fund balance allocation is remaining flat. But just important to bring out, so this $2.3 million is a, I don't want to call it a simple, but plug. Those are the district's reserves and savings, if you want to call it that, to help fill the deficit that's in the budget currently. Without that $2.3 million, we would be looking for $2.3 million either from the community, other resources, or looking at reductions of $2.3 million. But it's important to understand that we are deficit spending without that money. I'm sorry, with that money, we're still deficit spending. And our other category has to do with anticipated donations, interest we earn on our savings, on our checking and savings accounts for the bank accounts that we have, some small tuition we may receive, and other miscellaneous revenue that's received by the school district. But as you can see, based on the current climate, our other revenue has decreased, anticipated of roughly $80,000 for next year. So that gives us an entire increase of $2.5 million, which is a 3.76% increase to the budget. And as you'll see on the bottom, the estimated expenses are the same because they have to match. I just wanted to give the community and the board an overall view of that. These are alternate budget scenarios. These are different tax levy percentages that we have the option of looking at. Again, the tax cap is currently at 3.4%, and then each figure goes down roughly a quarter of a percent. This is the tax levy amount that equates to that percentage, as well as the increase that should say from 21-22. I apologize, not 22-23, and the additional amount per quarter of a percent. So again, I wanted to just stress to the board, going back to the previous slide. This is the current budget that we are anticipating as far as expenses are concerned. It's roughly $69.4 million, and it's a $2.5 million increase from our current budget. That includes rolling over our staff. We do have some anticipated increase that Dr. Bossert will speak to. But we do have high increases in in many categories, such as our health insurance this year. We saw a 12% increase to health insurance that carries over to partial next year, and then January 1st, the health insurance rates would increase again. We have our contractual bargaining agreement increases. We have transportation cost increases, which I'm sure the community and the board is used to. We spoke about that in length last year as we committed to a 5-year contract. We also have debt service increase for the money that we've been borrowing to pay off the bond work that has been ongoing. And we still have roughly $7 million to borrow for that. And that will play into the tax cap over the next, not this upcoming school year, but the 2 years following that. And again, that is usually offset by some of the building aid that we receive from the state once those projects are completed. So this is just an overall scenario of where we currently are and some of the options or alternate budget scenarios that the board can take into consideration. On the bottom, I just wanted to point out, last I checked with the town of Huntington, we had roughly, I'll say 4,700 taxable parcels within the Elwood community. And for each 0.25% of the tax levy, that equates to roughly, I'll say $30 per annum. But I just wanted to say I don't really like using the word average per household, because I do understand in the Elwood community there are varying levels of there's varying income levels as well as assessed values on each of the homes. So average is not true average for each person. Some people, the tax is much higher, some they are much lower. So I just wanted to point that out to the community. We don't assume that that dollar amount is for each individual. Questions, concerns?
If I just may add before we open for questions, Mr. Tamio, Ms. Dunkel, thank you. For the board, I know it's not an enviable position to ask you to help narrow down a target for the administration to work from. We apologize that there are so many unknowns at this time of year. There are several factors impacting our budget that does not help us to build program and to address some of the priorities identified by the administration. None of them are,
That's me, I'm sorry.
none of them are surprising. We anticipated the large increase to transportation. We have to absorb it in the budget. The contract that was signed last year was an overall 50% increase spread out over 5 years. This is year 2. The increase to healthcare could have been predicted and is very large. Our contribution to the teachers' retirement system has grown, and the employees' retirement system has grown. The cost of fuel that we are all seeing as individuals, we will see on a grand scale as a school district, and many other factors that are beyond our control. That's frustrating. There are expenses that we can certainly control as an administration, as a board, but it is those that are beyond our control that are really driving this year's budget development. So we're not putting up slides yet about programmatic adjustments, staffing adjustments, equipment purchases, and things of that nature, because first we have to make sure we can balance the budget with just the known expenses on what we already are obligated for. Our collective bargaining units are very reasonable, so while they are increases, they are reasonable ones. It is really those large drivers that are making this year's budget complicated. And as the board is aware, and to be candid, the board is accepting a number of retirements this evening with some very senior members of our staff, some folks that we will absolutely miss, who have given their careers and their very beings to our students, who we will miss. Without those retirements, we have 9 full-time members of our faculty and some additional staff. Without the savings for the retirements already built into our projection, we would be well behind the 8 ball. If not for those departing individuals and being able to replace those positions with entry-level salaries, we'd be in big trouble. And we'd be having lengthy conversations about what areas of our program, our staffing, we need to reduce in order to come in at a tax levy under the cap and one that the board could support. We're fortunate we're not there. So what we're asking the board to do tonight, and the community is aware, the board receives these slides in advance and has had more than tonight to just digest them, is to try to identify a target for the administration. And again, it's a backwards design, but when you help us to identify a number that you feel that you can support representing the community, and the community will support at our annual vote, we will then build the budget at that level. But it's with the knowledge and understanding that we're not looking at any dramatic increases to our programs or staffing. We're looking to maintain levels that we currently possess and make sure that the opportunities we're providing our students this year are similar next year. There are a lot of initiatives that our principals, directors have identified they would love us to invest in. This is not the year we have the financial flexibility to do so. So that wish list, unfortunately, will stay just that. But we are looking to build a budget that maintains the level of excellence we're currently providing to our students.
I just wanted to add a couple more comments, I'm sorry. I know we spoke about it last meeting, but I just wanted to remind the board and the community, because there's a lot of, I think, misconception out in the public eye regarding the federal grants that the school districts, not just us, the school districts are receiving. That money is completely outside of our operating budget, so it's not taken into consideration when we talk about our operating budget. So that money, while it helps us, doesn't affect our operating budget. Also, Elwood, as you see in the slide, received roughly $860,000 increase in aid. And we're not alone. There are many school districts who received very little state aid increases. And again, there's a perception out there, with some Newsday articles and things like that, that some school districts are completely flush with money. And some districts may have received millions of dollars. And again, that's based on their own individual situation. There's foundation aid that some school districts had been missing for many, many years, and they received money, and that's allowing them to go out at a zero. But that's not Elwood. That's not what Elwood needs. Elwood's situation is very unique and very different. So I just wanted to remind the community and the board of that.
Thank you, Ms. Dunkel. Are any questions from the Board of Education?
Quick question. On the slide where it says 2647 per annum, can you explain what that means, please?
That per annum, that is the average increase per 1/4%, so the $124,000 for each 1/4% of the tax levy. If you take that $124,000 and divide it over the 4,600 number of parcels or taxable homes in the community, it would equate to roughly $27 per year per household.
But I know you mentioned that, we have different home values in Elwood, so.
That's why I made that statement. There's a wide range of home values within the community, so it's not fair to say, that number is completely accurate. It would be for some and it wouldn't be for others.
So it could be higher for others and lower for others.
Correct.
Okay, so it's
And
it's
Mrs.
not
Scrilla-
really an average of Elwood, it's more of a, is it an,
That's the average for that particular calculation. If on a simple level, if you take the total dollar amount divided by the number of parcels, it would equate to $26.47 per house.
do you know the exact range of what it might be from lowest to highest?
No, I do not.
Okay.
The assessed value for the Elwood community has yet to be established, and then part of that calculation has to do with the tax rate as well. So that's not something that we try to do our best estimate, but it is very early in the timeline now to try to do that.
When would we get those numbers eventually?
Probably between mid-April and before the May vote. We usually put up a tax calculator on the school district website that people can plug in their assessed value, and it tells them what their tax increase is estimated to be.
Okay.
Mr. Scroll, just for a kind of comparison, one of our largest, if not the largest piece of property or parcel in the community is the Sears Mall. So to compare that with a farming agricultural piece of property like Mckenzie Farm, who may have tax breaks, to compare those two, it's really hard. But if you take everything and divide it, that's where that number derives from. And I think for transparency for the community is that $25, $26 increase per 25%, excuse me, or 1/4%, I should say. If we're going to the levy amount of the 3.40, then we're looking at approximately $100 per annum on average per parcel in the community, correct? I think,
That's correct, yeah. And again, that's an average, not taking into account each individual's home, each individual homeowner's assessed value. Some are higher, some are lower. But there's no way for us to really determine that, but the individual taxpayer can determine that using the calculator once it's up on the website.
Correct.
It's just a little early in the stage right now.
understood, thank you. Are there any other questions?
Lorraine, on the budget scenario, the first page, second page, the other, can you just clarify what those numbers are, the 261.5, the 181.5?
Sure. The largest portion that's playing into that decrease is that we have a tuitioned student who comes to Elwood who does not live in the community and pays tuition, and that student is graduating, so will no longer be receiving that income for the tuition. So that's one of the major drivers of that decrease that you see in other. But again, other earnings in that category are the interest we receive in our bank accounts, miscellaneous donations, and that's really it. There's nothing major that falls in that category.
Okay. I know in previous years, and this is a little premature, but in previous years, going back to, you gave numbers for, like, if your assessed value of your home was $4,000, this was what your increase might be if it was $5,000. I think when we do things like that, as opposed to, because we don't even really clarify what average is. And, it's like saying the average family is 2.5 kids. Well, nobody has a half of a kid.
Right. No,
So, it's, I don't know if it's fair to say it's, just going based on an average number as opposed to a range, I think is, much
Right. No, I'm sorry, Mrs.
clarity.
Weiss. I agree with you on that. And like you said, that number, that $26 is just an average, like simple for understanding purposes. But as I was mentioning when Mr. Scroll asked the question, that calculation that you were just talking about where people can enter their own assessed values, that's the tax calculator that we put on the website before the budget vote so people can estimate what their taxes are going to be. It's just too early to do that at this point in time.
Okay. Yeah, because the 26 I still don't understand what that $26 number is, but that's.
It's simple. If the number was 100 and we divided it by 5, the answer would be 20. It was just to show what the average, based on the number of parcels. It has nothing to do with the individual homeowners. It's just the actual number of parcels using the $124,000 value.
Mom, any questions?
Yeah, so my initial reaction is always like, who wants to pay more taxes? And, you know, we look at these scenarios and you want to keep it as low as possible. I just want to caution, you know, that we shouldn't be penny wise and pound foolish. The fact that we are deficit spending by $2.3 million again for the second year in a row makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. We, as a board, for years have been very cognizant of trying to, you know, keep everything as low as possible. We significantly went below the allowable cap on 2 occasions out of the last 4 years. 1 year over 3% and 1 year over 2%. So our basis has been affected by that. And for long-term financial planning, it concerns me if we don't go to the cap or as close to the cap as possible, because with every 0.25% that I'm looking at, it's like 1 teacher salary when you include the benefits. Are there any at-risk grade levels where if we had to start cutting, like how is that going to affect classroom counts? How will that affect the social worker that we put in the grant? Because we couldn't afford to budget the social worker that we so desperately need. And COVID has impacted us in ways beyond our imagination. So when our grant runs out, how are we funding that social worker if we don't have the money in the budget now to fund that social worker? So I'm just really concerned about our 3-5 years down the road if we're going to start cutting away at this, and what our tax cap may look like next year as our debt and our building aid and all these things come into play. Are we going to be able to, you know, what is that going to look like? I'm afraid if we do this again and we start chipping away, our fiscal stability will be impacted, our Moody's rating could be impacted, and we're still deficit spending by $2.3 million. That's not insignificant. That's massive. If we have to start cutting $2.3 million out of our budget, Elwood will not look like anything close to what it looks like right now.
I heard a question embedded within your comment that I'd like to speak to. We do have a number of programs and positions embedded within the federal grant, and it's important that the board understand and the community, and we convey to the community a point that you just made. The programs that are grant funded right now will continue to be grant funded next year and the year after. It was a 3-year federal allocation. So within that grant, we have some one-time initiatives that will come and will go. Dr. Hull is going to present to the board an K-6 elementary math textbook adoption. Included within the grant, it'll be paid for, we'll move on. There are other examples of reoccurring expenses that were included in the grant. You spoke to the social worker, there's the director of math, science, technology. There are some reoccurring expenses that if at the end of 3 years we do not include them into our operating budget, we will have to eliminate them. We are unable to include those reoccurring costs in this year's proposal. We are hopeful to have the flexibility at the end of the federal grant to include those that we identify as priorities, but we haven't yet. So for the purposes of this year, anything that is funded by the grant is within the grant, and at the conclusion of the grant will cease. So that's important to understand. You asked if there were any at-risk specifics. And yes, there are. There are some grade levels that are on the borderline of where we would like to add an additional full-time teacher to decrease class size and provide an optimal learning environment for our students. We have some grade levels on the tipping point, and whether or not we choose to add a section will be dependent upon the budget allocation that we have available. Obviously, if we have additional flexibility, we'll be able to provide additional staffing to our students.
I think that's really important, given the extent, the impact that COVID has had. We've seen the learning gaps. We're trying to catch up. Now is not the time. When I'm looking at cuts up there, and it equates to 3, possibly 4 FTEs that we can maintain, now is not the time to be chipping away at things like that when we need to really remediate.
I'd also like to share the other side. COVID hurt us everywhere, financially, mentally, academically, and a lot of people in our community are struggling to pay their bills. Gas prices are through the roof. I think as a board, we need to also be responsible to that. You know, COVID threw off our last couple of budgets, and I think we need to look at the big picture and be responsible to the taxpayers, and we also need to be responsible to our students. So I think as a board, we really need to examine this and come up with a solution that's going to work for everybody. Unfortunately, there's nothing we could have done about COVID. It really decimated all parts of our lives, but I feel like a lot of members of our community may be struggling right now financially, and I think we need to consider that too as we move forward with calculating a budget for all. So I just want everyone to think about that as well, because someone in our own community might not be being able to put food on their table right now. So that's something as a board we need to make sure that we examine thoroughly before we come to a decision.
I don't disagree with you, Mr. Scrolla. Of course, that's a thought on my mind, but we're going to pay, and we're going to pay at some point. So either we're going to pay gradually, or we're going to really pay down the road. So that's the balance that I'm struggling with too. Because for people who are struggling now, it's a struggle. But when we're going to have to pay tenfold down the road, or we're going to be decimating and catching up because we have overloaded classrooms and children are continuing to fall behind, I mean,
Well,
you know.
I think, you know, that was the purpose of the grant money for the 3 years, was because the state realized the impact that COVID had amongst the educational loss and the mental needs and whatever. So they were giving us that money to help make us whole. And they used a 3-year, now it's 3 years, maybe it's going to be 5 years, maybe it's not, but we had these 3 years to sort of catch up. I think, you know, sitting in the middle of both of you, I think what Mr. Scroll's trying to say, and I hear what you're trying to say, but we have to be fiscally responsible. We have to look at this budget and say, you know, these are all the things we want. I'd love to have, you know, classroom sizes of 18, and classroom sizes are very important. But, you know, we have to look at where is our number 1, number 2, number 3 priority, and then just like in everything else in life, you have to compensate in other areas. You can't always, and I'm not saying, you know, that this is, you know, the case, but you can't always get everything that you want. We have to see what is our need, what is our most need, and put our efforts into that. You know, I don't know how realistic it is to really demand of a community that's struggling. You know, you can't get blood from a rock. So I think we have to really look intensely at it and make the best educated decision on that.
I just also wanted to ask a question. Mrs. Mamalito and Mrs. Dunkel, like when you say that we're the $2.3 million that we're deficit spending,
Yes.
is that included? So is that happening even if you go to the 3.76%? We're including that deficit spending already, right? Or
Correct.
is that not the case?
No, that is the case, but what if the board decides, let's say, I'll just use a crazy number, say go to 2% instead of 3.4, our deficit spending, we would either have to make reductions or increase the reserve and the fund balance allocation. And the issue with that, like I said, So we have a $2.3 million deficit. That's money that's coming out of our own funds, let's just say, in order to fill the gap in between the revenue and expenses. Each year that we spend those monies, our overall fund balance, our overall equity for the school district goes down. So eventually, if we keep using those reserves and keep using the fund balance and we keep spending that money, there will be nothing left to spend. So we won't have that allocation. So it's just, when we talk about deficit spending, that's what that is. And again, we for the reserves that's on the board, that's for our ERS, our Employees Retirement System contributions. So our invoice typically on an annual basis is roughly $800,000. So that's built into the budget, but then it's offset by the reserve allocation. But then that reserve is decreased. So it'll go, say, from 1.6 million to 800,000. So we can use that reserve one more year. The following year, there is no reserve. So that $800,000 disappears. So where are we getting that other $800 from? Maybe we have state aid increases. If not, we have to go out to the community. If not, we have to make $800,000 in reductions. So that's the long-term fiscal responsibility that I speak about. It's not just a one-year thing. I mean, there's a school district out there this year that found themselves in a very bad position. They're going out to the community for 7.6%. And again, that's not us, but they had a problem, with their borrowing, with their building aid. They're in a bad situation. And that's what we would never want to do here. So we're trying to be fiscally responsible and make those decisions now, knowing, what may come down the road.
So by having this in the budget already, you are protecting long-term? Like if we do the 3.4%, that is going to protect us long-term, or it's going to give us a little bit more of a nest egg, or is that not the case?
It helps. I mean, the 800,000 and the 1.5 million has been what we have allocated. If you look at, that's the same thing we did for this current budget.
Right.
So this year, we're anticipating taking $800,000 out of the ERS reserve to pay for the ERS expenses. The situation we're finding ourselves in now at the end of the school year, we always like to replenish if we have those funds available, but looking at the estimates for the end of this year, we may be able to put back, say, $200,000 or $300,000. So now we reduced our overall equity by $500,000. I'm just saying, as we use those two allocations, we're spending them down, and then eventually there would be nothing left to spend. And again, I don't anticipate us ever getting into that situation, but these are some of the decisions that are made during budget season do affect that.
So Lorraine, just to interject here, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
For clarity purposes, so if we're at close or rough to the 4% right now, and we're taking roughly 2.3 million, where does that put our calculation as far as our percentage?
You're talking about the 4% unallocated?
Unallocated, yeah.
Well, that's a different category, and it's hard, without really illustrating it, it's hard for me to explain. But at the end of each year, the money that we have left over of the 4%, let's say we were at 4.5%, that 0.5% goes back into reserves or into fund balance allocation, so we have the ability to use it for the following year.
Okay.
That
And
makes
this year, is it this year, Doc, or next year that we're allowed to go up to the 8%?
Yeah, there's some pending legislation right now that would afford school districts the flexibility of having their undesignated reserves climb to 8%. That's not going to be a benefit that I believe the Elwood School District will be able to take advantage of. Ms. Dunkel has done a wonderful job making sure we have controls this year to examine our expenses, but we will feel very satisfied if we're able to report to the board that we've achieved our 4% of undesignated reserves at the conclusion of the fiscal year.
Okay.
And James, just another example, I don't know if it's, Dr. Bossert, I don't know if it's good to speak about the EBLR reserve?
Yeah, I think that's a relevant example to give, yes.
Not to mislead anyone, it's part of the time thing. So with all the retirements that we have coming this year, we have, the school districts, most school districts have a reserve for employees. It's EBLR reserve stands for employee benefit and leave accrual. So when typically, I'll use the teachers as an example because that's where we have our highest retirement this year. When they retire, they're entitled to receive a portion of their sick days that they've accumulated in that leave and are paid out somewhat, an incentive, I'll call it that, but they're paid a portion of their sick days. So we have a large amount of retirements this year, so we may spend a couple $100,000 on sick pay for those teachers. That money was not built into this current year's budget, so in order to pay that, we have to go to that particular reserve. So again, that reserve now may go from $500,000 to $300,000. So our overall equity has now just been reduced, but over time, we try to build them back up. That's just another example.
And then with that, there's the offset of new teachers coming in. So we're going to have kind of a,
Yes, as Dr. Bassett mentioned, the savings from the retirements is a great help in this budget. If we did not have them, we would be probably looking at reductions, but we do have, if a particular teacher that's on top salary retires, we may save $70,000 in salary, but then we're also adding benefits for that new hire. So that savings then goes down to roughly, say, $50,000, depending on if that person, the new hire enrolls in whether family coverage or insurance coverage. So it's not a straight across, wow, we have a teacher retiring at $130,000 and we're going to replace them, with somebody making $60,000 and we just saved $70,000. It's not that simple because the retiring teacher keeps their benefits and the new hire enrolls in benefits. So it's a +1 on the benefit side.
In speaking of reserves, to make sure the board is fully informed, the state has authorized districts to develop an additional reserve. I'm not quite sure how to title it, but it's to insulate districts on matters of pending litigation. There is a rash of lawsuits being brought against districts across the state. The state recognizes this, and we don't have a budget code for we're being sued and we need to settle the matter. So the state has authorized districts to establish a reserve that would allow for flexibility for when matters of litigation come up against a district that is not covered by our insurance provider. And while these circumstances are rare and we hope never to face them, it is a recommendation from the Comptroller's Office to begin such a reserve. Unfortunately, we don't have any funding now to establish the reserve. So we may bring forward a resolution to the board to establish such a reserve line with a starting balance of 0. And these are the types of things that we need to start focusing on moving forward. The state's budget, while wonderful for the state as a whole, also includes some additional unfunded mandates. The largest one is a bit down the road, but starting in 2027, all school buses purchased by school districts need to be 0 emissions. They need to be electric. That means our vendors have between 2027 and 2035 to completely turn over their fleets to electric school buses only to comply with state law. If you think we won't bear that expense, you're kidding yourself. So even though we just had a tremendous increase to transportation, we know that 5 years down the line, we're going to see another one. So we have to do as much as we can to maximize our reserves, knowing that there are some significant expenses on the horizon.
Other questions? No? Okay. Well, I'm going to give my 2 cents, since everyone else did. I feel like I owe it to the community to put my feelings and my thoughts out there. I have a tough time with this budget cycle. This is probably the hardest budget cycle I've ever encountered. And yes, we can throw the words pandemic and COVID and increases and all these things that are surrounding us. But as a community member and as a board member at the time, I find it really infuriating to sit here to know that we put a bond out to the community. And the point of the bond was we needed debt to come on the books to make sure that we had building aid coming in so we can offset the two, so we didn't have these issues. So our debt services were going to help the financial situation. And unfortunately, we didn't complete projects on time. Unbeknownst to us, COVID came, materials were held up, state ed was held up, and we had overwhelming amount of issues completing these projects. So with that, we're pushed back, and we're pushed back. So we're looking at the 24-25 budget cycle where we'll start seeing maybe, right, the 24-23, I should say, budget cycle where we're going to see the building aid, the debt services help the budget. So my thought and I understand Mrs. Mamalito's don't deficit spend. And 100%, if you're in the opportunity to not do that, of course you wouldn't, right? We don't have a savings to keep it there forever. We have a savings account to sometimes touch upon, breathe upon, give ourselves some grace to get through the next cycle. I mean, we've all been there, at least I can speak to myself, where, you know what, you need something, and you put in the credit card, but you don't do so unless you know there's a paycheck coming the next week. So I think in the case where we're looking at is we know building aid is going to help us in the near future, next year per se, and the year after. We can't project what our levy is going to be and what we're going to be looking to go to. There's no crystal ball that gives you that prediction. I understand that. But to look at the 0.25% increase and the $125,000 associated with such, if you go from the 2.5 to the 3.4, you're looking at $500,000. And I understand that is detrimental to program. So is there a way to find a happy medium where we work with our deficit spending, knowing that there's an allocation or a plan to try our best to refund those reserves, to meet us somewhere in the middle? Because I'm having a hard time. I know $500,000 is a significant amount of money. In the grand schemes out of the $50 million we're speaking of, it's really not, but it's increasing us 0.25% all the way to what we're allowed to go to. So I am curious, and it doesn't have to be tonight, but I'm curious I know you're going to give us our options at each interval, but it's hard to sit here and talk about what a levy number could look like without really seeing the full picture of what those increments do affect.
Yeah, I think the important point that we would ask the board to consider and take away is the closer we come to approaching our cap, the more flexibility we have in our budget planning. So simply, if the board is in agreement of going to that 3.4% tax levy limit, we will do our best to hold our deficit spending at current levels. We will be able to maintain all existing programs and staffing, and we will be able to entertain, and I can't guarantee it because we're still seeing some unanticipated expenses, but we'd be able to entertain some enhancements to our current program. Each time we go a tick below that, and if we're using quarters of percentage as a reference point, we have to consider either doing without, as you mentioned, which is something we're accustomed to, or approaching making reductions. So we want the board to feel comfortable with the number that we build the budget at. That's what we're asking the board to consider, charging the administration with a tax levy increase that would help us to determine what revenue we are working with. But we understand that we need the community's support as well. So we are giving you a difficult task of helping us to try to predict, what tax levy increase our community can bear in order to best support our schools. The higher the number, the greater flexibility we have. The lower the number, the more difficult our task will be of balancing our current programs and staffings and offering to our students. So it's really hard for me to answer your question directly and saying this is the number that will get us where we need to be. The best answer I can give you is the more flexibility we're provided with revenue, the more flexibility we have with programmatic adjustments.
My wife would agree. The more money I give her, the more she spends. I get the rationality, trust me. I'm just struggling with what can we get to? What's the amount we can get to that we can meet? And I guess we have to go in a more methodical approach to see what it is that would look more accustomed to what we're having today, what we can do without tomorrow, or what we're looking to add into. That's the problem I'm having. I know it's not a simple question. I'm not looking for an answer, so please don't feel on the spot yourself or Ms. Dunkel. It's more of a rhetorical question of my own to say, what is it that we have to get to meet the balance of our community, the needs of our students, and get support to pass this budget? I think that's more of what I'm trying to wrap my head around, knowing that you're going to see a news day, the schools are flush with money. We're going to know that there's been a bond passed with this notion that we're going to be in a better position down the road. Well, we're down the road and we're not in that better position. Why? We know, COVID. We can answer and do the tug of war all day. I think at the end of the day, the five of us have the hardest job to figure out what's the strike point that this community is going to support without giving detrimental impacts to our students and our schools. Hard decision. I just don't know. For me, the 0.25% doesn't seem like a lot, but going in intervals like that, and I'm looking at it because that's how it's given to us, I feel that we can find a balance there and maybe allocate some more funds to offset that, knowing that hopefully there's brighter days ahead. And I know I'm one of the biggest proponents of speaking about multi-year budgets. I think it's imperative that we look not just for this year, but 3, 4, 5 years down the line. But sometimes you got to just make the bills and get past to where we got to get to. That's kind of where I'm feeling right now.
Ms. Dunkel and I have both been communicating with our counterparts in other districts to try to get a sense of where the region is. I know that the Elwood board and the Elwood community would really have pause if all of our surrounding districts were going out at 0%, 0.5%, 1%, and we are hovering around 3%. It's not the case. From the conversations that Lorraine is having with other business officials and myself with other superintendents, if we are at that right around 3 number, I think we'll be in the median of our county. And please don't quote me on that, because conditions can change, and what superintendents are reporting now could be different than what their boards elect to do. But I feel comfortable reporting to the board that if the board authorizes the administration to build a budget at right around that 3% number, we won't be the largest increase in the county or close to it, nor will be the smallest impact. There will be some districts going out to the community at 0%. I want to be transparent. Those districts received a much, much greater increase to their overall state aid allocation than we did. There are some districts that find themselves in very dire straits, and Newsday has reported some of them, who will be going to their communities for a 6 or 7 or 8% tax levy increase just to maintain their current program with reductions. I would like to give our community a balance. I would like to provide a program of excellence as we are this year without looking at any dramatic cuts in any particular area. And we are very thankful that the retirements allow us to be in a position to come in under our cap and to maintain our existing programs and staffing. I would love to be in a position where coming in under that cap gives us the opportunity to enhance our program. It's not where we are. Much like Mrs. Tomio, I would love to go shopping. What I really just want to do is pay the bills I already have. So that's where I think we are. And if I could advise the board as best as I can, it would be very difficult to go too far below that 3% number. While we would love if you support 3.4%, we also need to feel confident that the community will as well. So I would love to be able to try to assess a consensus of the board this evening. We're not looking for a vote. We're not looking for hands to go in the air. We're not looking for a commitment. We're looking for direction so that Ms. Dunkel and I can sit and finalize a balanced budget to present to the board, knowing that the more we go below our allowable cap, the less we can include in the proposal. You know, it's just math, unfortunately, at this point.
All right, well, thank you. I think to the board, with that being said, we're looking at 5 points here: 2.5, 2.75, 3, 3.25, and 3.40, which is our cap. I believe, I don't want to speak for the board, but nobody's willing to go to the cap at 3.4, or is anybody willing to do that?
I'm not, but I would like to see the different levels. I think it would be a good idea to see where we're at 2.75, where we're at 2.9.
Mrs. Weiss, can you explain what you mean by that question? Or are you talking about in the programs, what would we be?
Yeah, the proposals. What would we, yes, well, what are we looking at in terms of, you know?
We wouldn't realistically be able to provide that at this time. What we can provide is the dollar amount. Again, the board gives us the direction to build a budget, and we develop that budget based on our best estimate and all the information that we're provided. But when the community votes on the budget, they're voting on a dollar amount, not necessarily the spending plan, because the spending plan can change. So it wouldn't be fair to you or the community to try to tell you what may or may not be included in the budget, because things change on a daily basis. If we have 2 special ed students come into the district over the next month or 2, that's going to skyrocket our special ed budget. So
I know,
now
but
we have to increase special ed, but now we have to reduce in another area. So it's not something that's easily attainable at this point.
Right, but you're talking about the difference between a 3.4 and a 2.9. You'd have to make like cuts and adjustments. What are those? You know, just like the same thing. Where's the priority going? Is it going from one area to another? Is it going from academics to mental health, or what? You know, it's very hard to commit to a percentage when not knowing what that percentage actually. You know, one is giving us a wish list, one is giving us not a wish list.
I will try to answer your question as best I can, although the crystal ball is still a bit fuzzy. The difference between 3.4% and 2.9% is approximately $250,000, $250,000, correct, Ms. Dunkel, before I misspeak? Lorraine? Thank
Yes,
you.
that half, yes, that half
So-
a percent is roughly 250,000.
So that $250,000, Mrs. Weiss, to best answer your question, is that flexibility we were looking for some enhancements that would help us to address some class size initiatives on the elementary level that are on the bubble, of adding a section or not adding a section. And there's a position within our custodial and maintenance department that we were hoping to add, which may be on the fringe of not being able to include. Now, I don't want to make commitments because some projections might come in less than we currently have, and I might be able to say, even at 2.9%, we're able to do these things. So I don't want to present to the community or the board that we're playing a shell game, which is Ms. Dunkel's response, that we don't want to commit to specifics aligned with the tax levy this early in the process, because I don't want to present something that is not concrete or accurate to the community and then have them say they cast a vote with incorrect information. So it's why we try to determine what our revenue is and then build the budget around that, and then we present to the community what we were able to include. The most concrete projection I can give to the board tonight is that if we come in at a tax levy increase below that 3%, we are working very hard to make sure we can maintain all of our current programs and staffing. If we go too far below that, we will be facing reductions. And if we go above that, we will be able to investigate some targeted enhancements. That's really the best I can do to project the difference between those half and quarter percents.
I think that's what we're all looking for, so thank you for the clarity on that. I think it helps to see what the percentage would be to keep us at status quo. You're feeling somewhere around that 3% mark, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
If we do go to the 3%, is that still long-term kind of an issue with the savings? And are we going to be in trouble 23, 24, or 24, 25, or is that difficult to assess?
You know, Dr. Siddiqui, I would love to give you a very articulate answer to that question, but I can tell you this. The lower our base is, the less percentage of increase will be in the future. And that's the piece of information that we always have to keep in mind when adopting a budget. When we do not go to the tax levy cap, I understand it. We need to find the balance between the needs of the district and the needs of the independent taxpayer, and I understand that. But each year, when we decrease our base, we are impacting future increases that we receive from both the state and our local taxpayers. So every year impacts the next. We're not looking to replenish reserves at this time. We're looking to maximize the use of them. As Ms. Dunkel mentioned, it's wonderful that we have these retirements, but there's a retirement incentive built into our collective bargaining units that requires us to dip into a reserve to pay the folks to exit. We won't be able to replenish that reserve this year. So we will do our best, and we've been doing, it feels like we watch the same movie every year. We do our very best to maintain, to enhance whenever possible, and try to find stable ground. It is difficult. The impact of the pandemic was unexpected, and I think we've done as best job as possible to weather that fiscal storm, and the state has been helpful, but not the solution to the problem, and the federal support is temporary. So I can't say that at 2.9%, 3%, or 3.4%, there aren't difficult days ahead. I think there are difficult days ahead, regardless of the budget that we adopt this year. But I think we should do whatever we can do to put us in a position to best face future challenges. So my recommendation to the board would be to go as close to that tax levy cap as possible that you feel you can support and you feel the community will support.
Lorraine, is there any monies allocated in this budget for the capital reserve? Allocated?
No.
Nothing. So we're putting zero into the capital reserve this year?
Yes, at this point, yes.
Okay.
And I just want the community to be clear. Mr. Tomio made a statement before about the deficit spending. I just want to reiterate that at 3.4%, and this is not for you, it's for the community, at 3.4%, we're still deficit spending by $2.3 million. So I just want the community to be very, very clear about that. It's not that if we go down to 3%, we're still deficit spending even if we went to the cap.
Historically speaking, Mrs. Mamalito, in January and January of 2020, the board had a workshop where we talked about our finances and the need to eliminate deficit spending, address our reserves. And that year, because of debt service and some other exemptions, we had tremendous flexibility within the cap. And the board developed what I thought was a very reasonable and well thought out 3 to 5 year plan of the ways to eliminate deficit spending. And the board was braced to ask the community to accept a one-time large increase to the tax base somewhere around 6%. And that would have helped to eliminate our reliance on the reserves and the fund balance within our budget, and really brought us to a baseline that would have been very fiscally responsible and healthy moving forward. Unfortunately, some events took place in March of 2020 that changed our fiscal planning dramatically. And it's unfortunate because we would be in a very different place right now had we been able, and the community had supported the initiative we had planned for June of 2020. That said, between that time and this time, we've been able to provide a program of excellence to our students. We've been able to maximize the use of our federal grant to supplement activities and programs that have helped some of those gap closing initiatives, and we're in a very good place. And I don't want to end this conversation without conveying confidence to both the board and the community that whether the board authorizes a 3.4% tax levy increase to build a budget at or 2.9%, we will continue to provide a program of excellence to the district and our students next year. I do have concerns about challenges that we will face moving forward, but at this time, there is very little dramatic action we can take, like that opportunity in January of 2020, to address our long-term fiscal health. What we are trying to do now, best metaphor is tread water, before we empty the pool.
Thank you. Lorraine, is there a reason that you came up with the 2.3 for deficit spending? Is there a reason why we came to the 2? Is it a percentage of what we have already and we don't want to go below a certain amount, or is it just to build into a budget to keep us in the confines of our tax cap?
Well, that's a two-part question, or answer, I should say. The $800,000 for the reserves, as I mentioned before, is typically what we spend on our ERS expenses, and you cannot allocate more than what you're going to spend. So that's what that $800,000 represents. The $1.5 million is flat or unchanged from last year, and I kept it when we roll over the budget. We typically keep things level or flat unless we have to make adjustments. So 2 years ago, that fund balance allocation was at $1.25 million. But because of the situation we found ourselves in with the tax levy and our expenses, the board agreed to increase that from 1.25 to 1.5. So that number is just what we've been, I'll say, carrying over the last few years. Again, the plan that Dr. Bossert mentioned a few minutes ago, we did have a plan to start decreasing that number. I think we were able to decrease it. I think it was at 1.5, and we went down to 1.25, and now we're back up to 1.5. But we do. I'm sure
there's a logical reason why you don't want to suggest us going to 1.75 this year, besides deficit spending and decreasing.
No, I do not think that would be a wise decision for the district. That would hurt us financially.
Okay. Thank you. All right, board.
So now,
how about them apples?
The literal $1 million question. We are looking for a board consensus tonight, not a vote, and a direction to give the administration to build the budget, because at the next board meeting, we do have to present you with a budget for adoption. So having the information of what you feel would be acceptable makes the work of the administration feasible. It would be very, very difficult to adopt a budget at the next meeting without guidance from the board of where you would like to see that land. Changes at the table and documents that have to be submitted to the state, and the work that happens behind the scenes in the business office to make sure everything balanced would be very, very difficult if we waited to the last meeting to set the target. So I apologize again. I know we're asking you to look into your crystal ball the same way we are working within ours, but we are looking for a consensus and some guidance from the board tonight of action to take moving forward.
All righty. Dr. Stiggy, you have a comment? You ready to throw your number?
No pressure. I agree with, I do feel that the community is hurting. I think just the same as, the school district is also having transportation expenses, healthcare expenses, gas expenses. This is all also the community. So while I do feel that we should try to go up to the tax levy, if we can see what we can do at 3%, or maybe 3.2% even, then, at the next meeting, we can see where the cuts may lie. But I would be interested to see what we can do at 3%, so.
All right, thank you. We have somewhere at 3%. Mrs. Scarola?
Yeah, I do. Like I mentioned before, I think this is, a tough time for everybody. I would feel comfortable around 2.9%.
All right, so we have a 3, we have a 2.9.
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead, taking my notes. Let's see where we meet.
I say I would like around something 2.75 to max 2.9.
Okay, 2.75 to 2.9. Mr. Mamalito?
If we can keep the integrity of our program, possibly have to forego some enhancements, but maintain all our staff and ensure that our class size doesn't go over that 25 number in the elementary. And we have a plan in place to maintain the social worker and the MST in a few years, because we need to work that into our future planning at 3%. I would be comfortable with that.
Would that be the 3%, or are we talking more about the 3.4 to have those positions built in when the federal monies fall off? I just want to be realistic here with that comment.
Yeah, I don't,
I want you to be,
I think,
It's
Mrs.
not real.
Mamalito, that the maintaining of the MST positions in social work will have to be part of next year's budget conversation. We're fortunate to still have 2 years within the grant, and I would feel irresponsible to project whether or not we can include them at this time. Your class
regardless
size,
of the 3 or 3.4?
correct.
Okay, that's fine.
No, at 3.4, Mrs. Mamalito, I think we would be looking to add an additional elementary section and a full-time groundskeeper to our maintenance department.
And if we don't add that teacher, what does that look like?
One of our elementary grade levels at this time would be starting at our self-imposed cap of 24-25.
Does that put you at the cap, Ms. Mamalito, or closer to the 3, given there's no assurances of those two, I'll call them wishes?
The elementary classroom is an issue for me.
And again, I want to be crystal clear with the board. If the board authorizes us at 3.4, 2.9, 2.75, whatever variable you feel you can support, please don't restrict this conversation to this is definitively what's going to occur. We're still doing a lot of projecting at where increases and any potential savings are. And I don't want the board or the community to perceive a shell game where I say tonight that we need to go to 3.4 to add an elementary section, and then at 2.9 we have the flexibility to add an elementary section. I would hope that would be possible. I can just say the higher the number, the greater the flexibility. And I don't want to be disingenuous with this Board of Education or the community when we present the budget. I don't want you to leave this table thinking one thing is contingent upon the other.
So around 3, Ms. Mamalito? You guess? Can't go to 5, so, well, you could if you want to pierce the cap. All right. First and foremost, I want to thank Lorraine and yourself for being honest with us and the community. It is not easy to sit here and paint a picture of reality. It's sometimes nicer to play that shell game, and we've seen it done, not here, but in other places and in other entities. They play that game. So I'm glad we're not playing that game. We're being honest with the community, and unfortunately, it's the reality of what we're in. With that being said, I am comfortable somewhere around that 2.74, nowhere past 2.9 this year.
So, Mr. President, I'm going to ask you to help me.
Yeah, I have the numbers, don't worry.
Okay.
So we have a range, to give
Yeah,
you the
yeah.
county numbers here. We're somewhere between 2.74 and I would say 2.9,
With the-
based on the 5. You had a 3, Dr. Siddiqui, 3 from Mrs. Mamalito, 2.9 from Mrs. Scarola. Ms. Weiss is somewhere between 2.75 and 2.9,
So-
and then I'm somewhere between 2.74 to 2.9, no more than 3.
Okay. Can I then make a proposal to see if we have board consensus
I think that's a,
based upon
yeah,
the
it's
input that I've
exactly where I,
received?
go ahead. You have a number you want to throw at us to see if we're close to?
Yes, and
Go
Ms. and Ms. Dunkel, please
I think,
please don't hurt me tomorrow.
I know the number.
Do we have board consensus to build the operating budget for presentation at 2.9%? Question mark. You thought I was going to say 2.99.
I had you at 2.8.
2.9. I think what I'm hearing across the table, I'm hopeful that there's board consensus at 2.9.
All right, and without a vote taking place, this is clearly just a non-committal yes, if you will. Are you comfortable, Mrs. Scarola, at 2.9?
Yes.
Building a budget around 2.9, let me clarify. Ms. Weiss?
Well, that's the top end of my range, but, yeah, I guess.
Okay, Ms. Mamalito?
No.
Okay. Dr. Siddiqui, excuse me?
Yeah, I wanted 3.
You're at 3. So you and Mrs. Mamalito are no's, and you're at 3s, hard 3s? I would say, if we're playing the hard game.
I would do a
Right.
2.99 if for optics you guys want it in the 2s. I think that people will see 2.99 and know it's really 3. But 2.99, I would go there if you want to see that 2 number. But we're talking nothing at that point. But I don't think we should go any lower because I think it's fiscally irresponsible at this point. But that's just my opinion.
All right, thank you. So we have a 3 and a 3, which could be rounded to 2.99, Dr. Siddiqui. Would you meet Ms. Mamalito at the 2.99? I
Yes.
feel like I'm at an auction house.
I
Do
know, I thought this is a consensus. We're just
Sold.
supposed
No,
to.
yeah. I will slap that gavel at one point. Mr. Scarola, you were at 2.9. Do you have any objections meeting the ladies at 2.99?
I'd like to stay at 2.9.
Okay, we have a hard 2.9. 2.99 times 2. And Ms. Weiss, you are comfortable at 2.9, but not higher?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're splitting hairs.
I mean, we are. I mean, at this point, you're talking $50,000, $60,000 in between the 0.25% here, but
That's almost an entry-level teacher before benefits.
well, there's no guarantees that we're going to be hiring an
Yeah,
entry-level teacher. That's my concern as well.
I think, we
It's-
have to
We're
look at
building a
what-
budget, and then we have to make sure that our plan fits. So yes, we might
Yeah.
have to hire a teacher at one FTE to meet that within the confines of this budget, and we might have to forego something else. What that is, we don't know yet. We haven't built the budget. We're building a number for the administration to work around. I mean,
It's a
contractually, what is we can't go higher than 25 kids in an elementary class? What is, I
Yeah.
don't know contractually, is it 30? I mean, you probably don't even know, but we would never break the contract, is my point.
I mean, we
The
can't.
contract gives a little more flexibility than we're comfortable with instructionally.
Correct, okay, so we would work within the confines of our budget to make sure that we weren't putting our children in a position that we would not want them to be educated in, is my point. But we would forego something, clearly this is not, we get and we get, we have to get and we have to give here.
There isn't a budget scenario this year that allows us to present large-scale enhancements to our community. This budget cycle will be focused on maintaining current programs and staffing.
Okay, well, we have 2.99s, we have 2.9s. I'm more comfortable at 2.75, so I think we have to be somewhere at the middle. So if you take the range of the 2.99 and my
Well, I'm comfortable with
2.75,
2.75, but you were hitting with 2.9, so, but yeah,
but I think if we meet somewhere in the middle, then we're at the 2.9 number. Does everyone agree that somewhere in between the 2.99 and the 2.745 number is somewhere at 2.9? Is everyone okay with that to build a budget around?
Can you say that again, Mr. Tomeo, please?
And that's okay if you're not, so I'm understanding some of you are very,
Could you state the range again, sir?
I'm comfortable at 2.74, 2.75. The high range we're at is 2.99. We have yourself at 2.9, so a little below the high. So I was suggesting we meet somewhere in the middle of those two and put it at 2.9.
can we only look at a
That's-
budget at one number, or can we look at a budget at two different numbers?
Well, I think we have to adopt the budget at the next hearing, so the problem is we have to give a budget that we want to see. So we wouldn't look at the next meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, and
That's
have
correct, yeah,
2.75, 2.85, 2.99, and say, good luck, administration. You're looking for the guidance to build the budget to present to us at the next meeting so we can adopt it.
Yeah, at the April meeting, we will be presenting the budget that we've been, at the number we've been instructed to do so for budget adoption by the Board of Education.
Okay. All right, board. I'm hearing passion on both sides here, and I get it, and I respect it, and I think we're doing the community's job, right? This is what we're elected to do, and we're doing what we're supposed to. But we do have to task the administration with building a budget this evening. So with that being said, if you're uncomfortable, it is your prerogative to support or not support our budget. We would hope that we would have support unanimously at this table, putting something before the community. So I would like to get to a consensus on this number. Do we have any objections at the 2.9 besides wanting to go higher than 2.9?
I have no objections on 2.9.
No
I just want to
objections?
also make sure that class size is an important part of the conversation, because class size, like one of our community members always brings up, is really, it does impact everything. Like even mental health can be impacted if you have a smaller class size, and there's plenty of studies showing that.
100%. I think I spoke to that. As far as I'm concerned, is that will be a priority in the forefront of my thoughts throughout the budget process. But once we get a number, then we have to work and task our administration to make sure that we meet the numbers that we want within our classrooms. I think it's fair to ask for a reasonable number in our classrooms. We always have, and our administration does a wonderful job with hearing those concerns from both the community and ourselves. So I think that's not going to be something that's forgotten about or kicked down the road during this budget cycle. I think what we have to come up with is what's the tax levy amount that the community is going to support and that we're comfortable putting forth right now. And I'm hearing somewhere around 2.75 to 2.9. It's just a matter of a little compromise here.
I thought three of you said 2.9, no?
I had Mrs. Weiss on the low range of 2.75 to highest 2.9 is what she said. So we had 3.3. Mrs. Scarola was at 2.9. Ms. Weiss was 2.75 to 2.9, and I was 2.74, no more than 2.9. So
If everybody will go on the top end, I'm still at 2.99, but I don't,
when I said it, you talked about
Consensus.
2.9, you said no, and I know it's because you wanted more, but you said
Correct.
no, so that negated your 2.9. So are you comfortable with giving up your 3 to a 2.9? I mean, if that's what you're saying, then that does change the numbers.
I'm misunderstanding what you said. Can you
Before,
repeat?
when I said 2.9, you shook your head no, because you wanted to go to 3, remember?
Right, you have
So-
consensus. I mean, it's not the full board.
don't have-
I'm not,
I don't have
I
consensus,
don't think
though.
that this is good financial planning.
Okay, and that is your...
And that's my prerogative, and so I'm a
100%.
no right now, so if you guys have consensus for 2.9, it is what it is, I don't have a say.
But we don't have consensus for 2.9, that's my concern. Is I have Mrs. Scroll at 2.9, Dr. Steege at 2.9, Mrs. Weiss and I are below that, and you want to be above 2.9. So are you willing to go down to 2.9?
No.
No.
Mrs. Weiss said her top is 2.9, so
Her top, but she prefers not to go to that, was my understanding. Am I misinterpreting you, Ms. Weiss? Because you,
I would like a number between that, yes, James.
between that.
So, but.
So I said 2.8 to be in the middle. We're going the wrong direction for you, Mrs. Mamawita. I understand your reasoning, and I've sat in that seat and had the same trepidations of multi-year budgeting, but I'm not feeling it. I don't feel that it's in the best interest this year to put the burden like this on the taxpayer. I'm having a hard time. So with that said, we'll go the opposite way. Dr. Siddiqui, 2.8? No. Mr. Scrolla, 2.8?
No.
Ms. Weiss, 2.8?
I will.
You
but-
would, and Ms. Mulley not, so we're still at an impasse. So Dr. Bossert, do you want to
Okay, if I may.
build somewhere between 2.8
If I may.
and 3?
Thank you, Mr. Tomio. It's important that the administration receive clarity so that we can present a budget that is balanced and we can be more articulate on what is included within it as far as our staffing and programs. I'm going to thank the board for being as candid as you have been with your thoughts and perspectives. I'm going to appreciate the position of the board in trying to set us up the district for the best fiscal health moving forward. But in the interest of making certain that we are meeting our obligations and our timelines, I'm going to, based upon the conversation, ask 5 members of the board, and understanding that some of you would like to be slightly below and some of you would like to be slightly above, to once again consider a 2.9% tax levy increase. Consensus means that the board can agree to it. It may not be the exact number you're looking for or would prefer to support, but I'm looking for board consensus to charge the administration with building the budget at the suggested 2.9% tax levy increase.
Give me 1 sec. I'm doing a calculation. I'm not texting. Give me 1 second, please.
Mhm.
If you take the high and the low, the 2.5 and the 3.4, divide them out, you get 2.95.
James, can I ask a question, Dr. Bossert?
Sure. Dr.
So
Beatty?
you don't feel that going below, you can build a budget going below 2.9? Is that what you're saying?
I can build a budget without a tax levy increase. Unfortunately, I'll have to make reductions to the program and staffing. The more revenue that the district receives in the form of local property taxes in addition to our state aid, the more flexibility we have to maintain current programs and staffing. So the higher the number, the more flexibility we have. And I really don't want to be disingenuous with the board of the community. Whatever number you give me, the administration will build a budget at that number. That number will either include grand modifications in the form of reductions, or it will maintain stability of what we currently possess. But whatever number you provide is what we will build the budget at. The responsible number is as close to 3% as possible.
Responsible to the
To-
district.
Responsible, I'll change my term. The number that would help us to maintain our current levels of program staffing and offerings to students would be as close to that 3% as the board feels comfortable. Yeah.
Thank you, that clarity wasn't allowed. So looking at the 2.75 and the 3 number, we're talking about $125,000, correct? Mrs. Mamalito's terms, 1 FTE, approximately,
Right,
correct?
but every 1/4% is roughly 125,000. And I want to remind, I guess, the board, I know you're discussing this, and $125,000 is a lot of money. When you spread that out over the community, and I'm not trying to be disingenuous, spreading out $125,000 over the entirety of the community has less of an impact if you reduce the budget by $125,000. So I just wanted to remind you of that. And I'm not trying to.
Can I ask a question? Because maybe I'm confused here. You're talking about a finite number, spreading that out, but you have people at different assessed values in their homes. So when you're talking about a tax levy percentage, that's not a finite number.
I understand that.
So, that's the issue that I have. You talk about a percentage, and I want to keep the integrity of the programs, but I also want to realize that for a taxpayer, a 3% 2.75% increase as opposed to a 3% increase is not $100. So it's a percentage, and then it's built on a foundation that goes up year after year after year. And, that's why Long Island has the highest taxes in the country, because, we just can continue to do this. So, I mean, I want to provide the best education to these kids. That's our job.
Right, and I
But I
understand that.
can't, if you're providing the best education to 10 people because everybody has to move out of the district, then, it's irrelevant here. I don't know.
No, I agree with you, Mrs. Weiss, and I think it's the same on both sides. It's, we talked about, reducing, the lower we go in the levy, the lower the base we have going forward. And again, that impacts the education that we can provide to the community. And if we don't have the programs to sustain, I think that affects, families who may want to move into the community because we're not providing that education. And I don't think that would ever happen in Elwood. We've always provided excellence here, and I think we will continue to do so. I just wanted to talk about that specific dollar amount. That's all. I'm not.
No, I understand.
It's frustrating.
It's frustrating on both sides. I think that's why
And we're
we're
a
all
tough
sitting up
community.
here and graveling over 0.25 of a percentage, but it's very frustrating. It's a
is,
very
because the
reverse
range is
type
what I
of
think you're
budget that
stuck
you're
on, Ms.
building,
Weiss.
and it's,
Right, you're stuck on the range. Elwood, we're not hop hog where our majority of the taxes fall within the same range. We range from $6,000 in taxes to $30-something thousand in taxes in Elwood. So on the lower end, you may see this. On the higher end, you're going to see a much larger increase. So it's definitely hard. I understand, I appreciate the reference here because it does give us an understanding that it's going to be spread out equally, per se, but the equivalence of the $30,000 property value and the $6,000 taxes is definitely going to be a lot more than $100. And I get what you're, so those quarter percentage points do make a big difference. I think that's why we're all struggling. I think Mrs. Mamalito feels the community could endure a little bit more, and we should for the long-term spending of the fiscal stability of this community. So I'm hearing where you want to be, and I've been there. I was there pre-COVID when we were that last one. I was ready to go to one of the highest points because I understood the long-term projection of our district and where we're at. It's just, we're in different times.
I'm not saying that the community can endure a little more. What I'm saying is, if we don't pay it now, it's going to grow exponentially and cause issues down the road. And then we're going to find ourselves in a situation where there are going to be draconian cuts. I'm trying to be proactive and slow the growth per se, and not have it just whale us in the head 3 years from now. And then we're really having tough conversations. So it's not about the community enduring or not enduring it. I just think it's,
I think that's everybody.
we're going to pay regardless, whether it's now or then.
And I hear you. I think the problem is we've been telling the community you're going to pay eventually, and we've been slowly putting this out to the community, and we have been going on average within above 2% for the last, since I've been on the board, except we have 1 year we were 1.99, if I remember. So we've been there, so I hear that you want to go because we're going to get there eventually, but is this the year? I don't feel it is. So that's where I'm at. So Dr. Bossert asked the question, I'll reiterate it. It was, do we have consensus at 2.9? I don't think we do, Dr. Bossert. Dr. Siddiqui, you said yes, if I recall. Okay, Mrs. Scrolla, you're comfortable at 2.9?
Yes.
2.9. Ms. Weiss? You're not? This hand. Ms. Bombelito? You're not. And I'm not comfortable at 2.9. So with that being said, is anybody comfortable going beyond the 2.9? Because Ms. Mamalito, I believe Dr. Siddiqui, you were comfortable at 3, correct? Correct, Ms. Mamalito, I don't want to speak for you. Mr. Scroll, are you comfortable going up and going to 3 to give a consensus for the budget?
No, I'm not.
Okay. I tried, Dr. Voster. That was, I was trying. Okay. I'm at 2.8. So does anybody want to meet me at 2.8? No. Correct?
I'll meet you at 2.8.
Well, that I knew, because you were down 2.75. Mrs. Scarola?
Nope.
Okay. Dr. Siddiqui?
I thought we had consensus at 2.9, maybe 20 minutes ago. We were right
if
there.
Mrs. Weiss gave a range of 2 point
Yeah.
whatever to 2.9, then
Then
that
that's the
implies that
range.
she would go, that's her range. So if you will go to the top end of your range, we have consensus.
Yeah, and also, like, I went down from my range to meet you guys, and I don't feel comfortable going down further.
Okay.
I went down from 3 to 2.9, and everybody had the number 2.9. Only Heather didn't, but I think that if 4 of us are at 2.9 and Heather's at 3, we can do 2.9. That's a consensus, because that's the major, that's, like, we're not voting,
I was at
but
274 is where I wanted to start. That's where I was comfortable
but
at.
you were going to 2.9,
I
didn't
was
you
willing to
say?
meet somewhere between 2.9.
You said 274 to 2.9, so
The range.
2.9 is
So
the
my
upper
range is in
limit.
between there is what I was saying, correct.
Yeah,
So
so you had
I'm good at
2.9 on
2.8.
there. My number was 3, you had 2.9.
I
Debbie
didn't,
with
for clarity, I did
2.9.
not have 2.9. I was
We
in
can review the
between,
tape.
in between 274 and 29.
Yeah, so that was your range, right? So 2.9 was your range.
If you go to buy a car at 36,000, but it could go up to 37, would you spend the top dollar, or would you spend somewhere in between trying to negotiate it? That's where I'm at. I'm trying to get somewhere in between. So
I mean, we shouldn't be
that's where I'm
negotiating
comfortable.
our program if our superintendent.
I'm not
is-
negotiating our program. I'm
Okay.
comfortable that our administration has the capability and has shown us year after year that when we put a budget before them, they give a stellar program for our students.
And your superintendent just asked you for 2.9.
And I asked them for 2.74, and I said I'd meet you in the middle of 2.8.
Well, you both said no to 2.9, so now you're arguing each other, but you both said no to 2.9.
Because we could use more, and Dr. Bossert's doing the negotiating now, and that's not really where we need to be. Otherwise, they wouldn't have presented a 3.4.
Well, we're splitting hairs of
I think
120,000.
2.9 is the number we need to be at. I think it's a fair compromise. I think our administration can preserve our programming at that number, and I think,
So I
you
hear
know,
Dr. Siddiqui, Mrs. Scrolla, and
I
Mrs.
think we're just being
Mamalito,
silly
you're not
now.
at 2.9?
I said 2.99.
2.99? Okay, so you won't go to 2.9, though, is the question.
I think we're just being silly at this point.
Well, then, I think we can go to 2.8. So, I mean, Mrs. Mamalito doesn't think we can go below 2.99, so we are at an impasse here of what we think we each want to put forth before the...
Don't put this on me, James.
I
You
did-
guys had a range up to 2.9.
not
Now
put
you're
it on you.
backtracking, and I'm not going to have you put this on me.
I'm not putting it on you, Ms. Mamalito, by all means. You want to, this is very fair. You can put the budget, I'll give the consensus 2.9. I will not support the budget, that's all. So we have consensus for 2.9, Dr. Bossert. You have myself, you have not Mrs. Mamalito at 2.99. You have Dr. Siddiqui, 2.9. Mrs. Scrolla, 2.9. I'll go at 2.9, but you do not have my support for this budget. Well, we could do that. Does that work? No, right, Dr. Bossert? Not particularly, so. And I was not putting anything on you, Ms. Mamalito. I was just saying that was the number you were at, just like I'm at my number. So I don't feel I should have to move from my number as you feel you shouldn't have to move from your number. I think that's fair that we're each supporting a percentage that we think is fair to the community and will keep the program intact. I was not in any way putting it on you, so if you felt that way, I apologize, but that was not my intent.
Apology accepted.
But with that said, Board, we do not have a consensus. So Dr. Bossert, my suggestion would build a budget somewhere between what you're hearing the range of the board and hope at the next meeting you can get consensus there with what you're building, because I don't have a suggestion for you.
I'm going to appeal one more time. I'm hearing Mrs. Mamalito more comfortable at 2.99%. I'm hearing Mr. Tamio more comfortable at 2.8%. I'm going to suggest that the midpoint between those two numbers is 2.9%, where Dr. Siddiqui, Mr. Scrolla, and Mrs. Weiss at the top of her range have expressed that they are comfortable. So I would ask the board president and vice president to consider meeting in the middle of each of your ranges so that we have board uniformity and consent at 2.9%. And I would charge Ms. Dunkel to finalize the development of the budget on the revenue side with a 2.9% tax levy increase.
I would support the 2.9% at the next meeting, but it's, Mr. Tamio said he'll support it for you to build it, but he won't support it, so that's still an issue.
I am appealing to the board president to reconsider at 2.9%, understanding that it is right not to do so.
Me either, Dr. Bossert. We'll tell you 2.75 and 2.99 get you at 2.87 mathematically, just speaking. So that's the range I'm comfortable with negotiating back to, and I'm not going to sit here and go back and forth. If the will of the board is 2.9, I am a team player, and I will support a budget where the consensus of the board is at. So I will not sit here and not support a budget that my fellow colleagues support. So if there is consensus at 2.9, I will be a proponent of putting that forth reluctantly. Do we have a consensus at 2.9? Mrs. Scarola?
Yep.
Mrs. Weiss?
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Bossert, you have your marching orders at 2.9.
Okay.
Thank you,
Ms.
board.
Dunkel, we will begin work tomorrow at balancing the budget at 2.9%. Right now, the budget is balanced at 3.4, so we will make approximately $250,000 in reductions from the revenue side in order to find a balanced budget. I want to both thank and apologize to the Board of Education. First of all, I want to thank you for the flexibility you've demonstrated with one another in order to find consensus at a midpoint that everyone is equally uncomfortable with. And the apology is for that. I wish I could speak in more definitive terms and provide you with a more concrete look at what the spending program might be. It is unfortunate that the board is charged with making decisions this early in the fiscal process when the governor's budget has not yet been adopted, expenses have not yet been fixed, and we are still using some pretty liberal projections in order to make certain we don't fall short of what our needs are to balance the budget. And I regret that the timeline puts the board in the position of having to make key decisions for yourselves and for the community without all of the information that would help you to do so. And I hope for a day where that is not the case, and I feel badly that the board is struggling with tonight's decision. I'm not accustomed to that. I'm accustomed to providing you with all the information, all the data, all the relevant items necessary for you to make a fully informed and decision that you can be comfortable with. But I appreciate the board's flexibility demonstrated with the administration, with one another, to give a charge tonight that will allow us to present you with a balanced budget at the next meeting.
I just wanted to say thank you as well. I know it's not an easy position that any of you are in, but I appreciate the direction that you've given myself, Dr. Bossert, and the rest of the administration to move forward.
Thank you all for your hard work, and we look forward to seeing a budget that you work around the number that was voted on tonight. Well, given to you tonight, not voted yet.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, for the community members still present, that brings us up to our residents' remarks, our first one. Anybody? The board encourages all residents to attend its meeting, and this section of the agenda affords them the opportunity to speak. Persons wishing to speak should identify themselves and any organization they represent at the meeting. Comments related to district business or any agenda item should be kept as brief as possible and may not exceed 3 minutes. Board Policy 1230. Questions or comments concerning matters which are not on the agenda will be taken under consideration and may be discontinued by the president. Public discussion of matters relating to staff, students, or others at which their reputations, privacy, or right to due process could in some way be violated is prohibited. Ms. Bell, just have to get the clock ready.
Hi, my name is Agape Bell, and I'm representing just myself and my family. So two things. Actually, first I want to say I think this was great. You guys had an open discussion with each other, and I'm glad to witness it. So I do want to thank you all for hashing it out and fleshing out everything. Oh, am I too loud? Oh, sorry.
The mic's working really well tonight. They usually.
Oh, I know. Wow. I'm not used to that. Oh, you know what? We usually have masks, so I'm used to like trying to project. My one question that first popped up was when Dr. Bossert was giving us the legislative update from his time in Albany, and I'm really glad the board did have you go and all that, and I fully, as a taxpayer, support that. And I think representation matters, and you being at the table really matters to me, and I appreciate you doing all that and traveling. What I did not like from what I think I heard from Commissioner Park, what's her name? Rosa? Yeah, okay. That the teachers would not be held accountable for lower scores, but yet there's no, Regents scores, but there's no definitive word on do no harm being repeated for kids. Like, if it does help your score for your class, put it, the way they did it last year. I hope when you do advocate that as a taxpayer and a parent, I would like to see that's parity. Like, if you're not gonna, the gaps are there, which hopefully the federal money is going to address. And I do think that if you do get an opportunity to speak to Commissioner Rosa again, that there should be parity on repeating that do no harm for the kids on the Regents if they're going to do no harm for the teachers. So I just wanted to, I did hear that in your update. And the other thing is, I personally would have liked to have seen a better breakdown on what the 2.5 increase in expenses are in the same slide. That might have helped, I think, and I think knowing that going forward will help the community. I would, because I know what I would like to see. I'm like, oh, these 2.5, how much of that is fixed costs that we can't avoid that increase? So that will help sell the yes votes, I personally believe. So I would like to personally see, of that 2.5 and the 3.4% increase, how much of it is we can't control. It's happening. It's, this is the actual hundreds of thousands in increase in the health insurance. I would like to see that number. I would like to see what percentage that is in the 2.9 that gets built in. And I know that's the next meeting. But I just wanted to say I'd like to see that.
If I may, Ms. Thomas, yes.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Bell.
Mrs. Bell, you're correct. Now that we have been charged by the Board of Education to build the budget at a 2.9% tax levy increase, we'll be able to clearly articulate to both the board and the community what each component of the budget accounts for as far as increases and decreases, our overall staffing levers, some of the more profound programmatic changes that impact our budget, and that's what you should look forward to seeing at the April meeting.
Good evening, Amy Kern. I'm going to move away from the budget. I had a question about the consultant service contracts that are action items, as far as CPR training by a registered nurse and also heart math. I was wondering what is heart math and who will be receiving that CPR and the heart math training?
The CPR training is for certified staff that is required to have CPR training as part of our ongoing professional development certification. So it's teachers, administrators, and other members of the support staff. The consultant is one of our retired school nurses who returns to provide that training and after-school forum. The heart math is part of our social emotional literacy program and mental health services that we're providing to students at the high school. This is training for teachers on strategies to incorporate into their classrooms. It's not a math program, it's a mental health initiative.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kern. Any other residents? Seeing none? That moves us up to our presentation this evening. Dr. Bossert, we're back to you for demographics for a 10-year comparison. Forgot about that? Well, let's hear.
Mrs. Hanley, you're always Johnny on the spot. Thank you. If you could advance the slide. The board has heard me reference the changing face of Elwood on several occasions, and when we talk about our demographics and what our classrooms look like, there are some data points that I felt would be appropriate to illustrate to the board to help substantiate those claims I continue to make. So what I asked Mrs. Ben Fonte, our district data coordinator, to put together is just a side-by-side comparison of what our district report card looks like this year versus 2011, 2012, which is 10 years ago. You can see that there's been some dramatic changes. Our enrollment has dropped considerably. You see that 10 years ago, we had just under 2,600 students, and now we have just under 2,000. And when we look at the senior class this year, which will graduate 182 students, and we compare it to the kindergarten class of 128 students, you can see that our enrollment trend matches the majority of districts on Long Island. We referenced finances on Long Island, we referenced economic difficulties that we are experiencing, and one of the trends that our region has seen over the last decade is families who are inhabiting our households are aging, and school-age children are not as plentiful as they were 10 years ago. And while I am not fearful that the Elwood School District will need to close the doors because our enrollment has remained rather steady since my arrival as superintendent 6 years ago, you can see that over the last 10 years there's been a dramatic decline in our enrollment, and our class sizes average with the low of first grade this year. The total number of students is 112, and the largest of our classes is our senior class at 182. Next year's junior class is 175. So there are some, great variances between our lowest class sections and our greatest. Will that help us with class sizes moving forward? Only if we're able to maintain our current staffing levels. So that's something that we're hoping to do. But then when you look at the demographic breakdown a bit, you'll see that the percentage of our students who are eligible for free and reduced lunch has increased from 16% to 19%. The economic stability of our community has changed a bit over the last 10 years. Now is probably a good time to inform the community that the program that has provided our students with 100% free and reduced lunch through the federal government will expire at the end of this school year. So we will ask our families to continue to applying for free and reduced lunch when it is appropriate for their household, and we will provide free and reduced lunch only to those households that qualify using the federal standard moving forward next year. Economically disadvantaged, and I created the asterisk at the bottom to explain how that number is reached, didn't exist 10 years ago, but nearly 20% at 19% of our families are considered economically disadvantaged. When you look at the breakdown of the stated demographics of our students, you can see that we do not currently have an American Indian students enrolled. The percentage of our Black or African American students has dropped from 8% to 6% over the last 10 years. And the most dramatic increase you'll see in our demographics is students who identify as Hispanic or Latino has doubled from 11% to 22%. And the predominant second language spoken in Elwood is Spanish. And you'll note that the largest percentage, if not all of our communication, goes home dual language in both English and Spanish to reflect that very large percentage of our community. Our Asian or Pacific Islander percentage has increased slightly from 8% to 10%. The number of students who identify solely as white has dropped from 72% to 59%, and that means white non-Hispanic on the demographic form we ask families to check. Multiracial self-identified families has increased from 1% to 3%. Limited English proficient, on paper, doesn't look like a dramatic increase, but I did a further breakdown of this number to illustrate an important topic to the board, but we've increased from 3% to 5%. And our percentage of students who receive special education services has increased from 10% to 14%. And there's some further information I want to share with you about that number as well. So if Mrs. Hanley advances the slide for me, we take a look at some key insights from the demographic breakdown. When we look specifically at our English language learners, which again, in 2011 was 3% of our students and today is 5% of our students, you see that the FTE means full-time equivalent or full-time teacher. We have increased from 4.0 to 6.4 with a 0.5 increase anticipated in 22-23. And not to skip to the end of the story, but we are likely to include that additional 0.5 increase in the federal grant allocation, as I don't anticipate the flexibility in the operating budget. Dr. Hull could do a much more thorough examination of Part 154. Part 154 regulations affect our ELL students and became effective in 2014. So the services we provide and are legally obligated to provide to our English language learners is very different in 2022 as it was in 2012. The level of need of our students has also changed dramatically. Students are given an assessment when they enter our district, nicest slat, that helps to evaluate their proficiency and their level of need for service. And the percentage of students who are at that level 1 basic learner level has increased a great deal, even over the last 2 or 3 years. So the services, the amount of one-to-one instruction, pull-out instruction, small group instruction that we're providing to our ELL students is very different now than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, without Part 154, students were brought together in larger groups with great expanding grade levels. We could put a kindergartner in the same group as a second grader. We could put a third grade in the same group as a fifth grader, bring 12 kids together, give them ELL services, and perhaps not have the same positive impact we have today under Part 154 regulations, which call for much smaller groups, much smaller groupings amongst grade level, and the frequency in which students are receiving services is dramatically different. So when we enter next school year, we'll be approaching 7 full-time teachers providing services to 5% of our population. Now, as we just discussed, each FTE is approximately $125,000 salary and benefits, so you can see that the increase to our ELL services has had an impact on our budget. Similar with special education, our goal is always to provide an education that meets the student's needs in the least restrictive environment. LRE is a term that every educational student knows for 50 years. But it is more impactful now than even a decade ago, where we're providing services in our district to students who may have been out of district placements in the past. Even looking at our chart on the 10-year snapshot, when we had 2,500 students, we had 22 students out of district placement for IEPs. Now we have 16. We also have programs available in the district, both in the regular year and the summer, that enable students to maintain their educational experiences here in our district with their peers, rather than having an out-of-district placement. The costs of our special education services have been steady, and we've been doing as an effective job as possible to not allow some of those high-cost special education services to drive our budgeting or to take away from the opportunities we're providing our students. So the budget increase has been steady at about 2% a year. But when we look at the number of students, we see that 10 years ago, we had 10% of our students allocated to 24.6% FTE, and now 14% of our students is 26.7, and that's pretty good, because keeping those students in-house and maximizing their opportunities in the district is something we take great pride in. So maintaining that LRE and keeping kids here with their typically developing peers and providing programs and services to them under our roof is something that we really have prioritized and something I think we're doing effectively. As commented by one of our board members earlier tonight, our district does have an outstanding reputation for programs and services we provide to students with IEPs, and we take great pride in that. Our families of students with IEPs are some of the most supportive and complimentary in the district. The parents are very, very grateful and thankful, and I appreciate the support of the board in allowing us to develop programs that keep Elwood kids in Elwood. But some of those expenses associated with doing that are big impact drivers of our budget, as Ms. Dunkel alluded to earlier. And that's really all I wanted to highlight from the 10-year look back. It's important to understand that Elwood, like every other district on Long Island, is changing. There are districts that have had much more substantial changes to the demographics than we are, but you can see that we're steadily becoming more diverse. We're steadily having an uptick in our economic need, and I don't anticipate these trends changing. When we get new enrollments in our district, we're starting to see some commonalities within the families moving into the district, and the one that we see most frequently is families representing our Hispanic and Latino population, and many of them requiring ELL services. So we are equipped to meet those challenges. We are hopeful that we're meeting the needs of all of our students, but our students today are a bit different than they were 10 years ago, and I wanted the board and the community to look at some of the data that we have been using in our offices and behind the scenes to guide the work and the priorities that we set. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions?
Do you have a question, Tom?
Okay, I do. On the chart on page, I guess, 1, you have the eligibility for the lunch, free and reduced lunch. And I'm curious, the number on top, there's a 402 number, but then you said it increased in 2021 to 22, up 3%, but that number above it is lower than the 402. Can you clarify that? Is it supposed to be 477?
Mrs. Weiss, the percentage is based upon the total enrollment. So the total enrollment in the 11-12 school year was...
Oh, so it went down, and that's, okay.
Got it.
Okay, sorry about that, I didn't.
No problem.
That was the easiest question of the night. Ms. Mamalita? Dr. Siddiqui? The only question, not a question, just a pledge, Dr. Bossert. Pre-COVID, this was a lot of our legislative conversations at many of the breakfasts and many of the meetings that we attended was our ELL students and how we were going to fight for funding because it is an unfunded mandate. We had a student who needs services, and we have to find within our budgets to do that. So hopefully with COVID in the rear view, we start looking forward through the windshield now to get back to making sure that we fight for our ELL students and the funding associated with it.
Yeah, Ms. Tommy, I would clarify your point. There is an aid category called high-cost aid, and there are special education students, when the cost of providing them with education reaches a certain threshold, we receive additional aid for those students. There's no such category for ELL students, and our ELL students often require the additional support services and staffing of special education students. So you're correct in that we are advocating for additional aid to help meet the needs of our ELL population.
That's great, thank you. That brings us up to our board recognition of donations tonight. Dr. Siddiqui, if you would.
Thank you. The board is honored to recognize the John Glenn Parent-Teacher Students Association for their donation tonight. I just wanted to say before I get to that is our PTAs are amazing. I just, from Harley, Boyd, the Elwood Middle School, and the high school, if you haven't already joined, please join. Come to the meetings. They're a fabulous group of people, and you can get involved in any way, shape, or form that you want. And I really think they do such an amazing thing for our community, our students. And so on that note, I wanted to, from the Board of Education, recognize the donation given by the Elwood John Glenn High School, PTSA, the donation of $4,000 for the purpose of supporting the purchase of a new replacement scoreboard for the football field. So as we all know, the football field scoreboard is in need of repair, and the PTSA has generously donated this amount. Do I need to read this exactly?
I will, and then we'll
you'll
go
do
for a
that.
vote. Yep.
Okay, great.
Thank you for
So
recognizing.
thank you.
No, thank you for recognizing them. So, board, be it resolved. I have a motion for the following. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby accepts the donation of $4,000 with gratitude from the Elwood John Glenn High School PTSA for the purpose of supporting the purchase of a new replacement scoreboard for the football field. I have a motion. Motion, Ms. Mamalito, seconded by Dr. Siddiqui. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? 5-0. And that brings us up to our consent agenda. I have a motion to approve the consent agenda this evening. Motion, Mrs. Scrollis, second, Mrs. Mamalito. Questions or comments? Seeing none, 5-0.
If I may,
You may, Dr. Bosser.
with the board's acceptance of the consent agenda, the board has accepted the resignation for the purpose of retirement from some real Elwood legends. I don't want to call anyone out without risk leaving anyone out, but I would say congratulations to those individuals who have reached this milestone in their journey, and we look forward to celebrating our retirees at the June meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Bossert. And that brings us up to policy. We have a second reading on the agenda tonight for the adoption of a policy. I have a motion for the following. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the second reading and adoption of the following policy and exhibit as presented to the Board of Education at this meeting. Policy 1230, public comment at board meetings, and 1230-E, public comment at board meetings exhibit. I have a motion. Motion, Mrs. Weiss, seconded by Mrs. Mamalito. Questions or comments? Seeing none, 5-0. And that brings us up to our second residence remarks. Seeing none, that brings us up to our adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn? Motion, Mrs. Weiss, seconded by Dr. Siddiqui. All in favor? 5-0. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.